Oh, baby, we're talking Gophers, Hawkeyes. Can the Gophers keep Floyd and win back to back today?
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Now, we pushed Thursday's episode to Friday because I want to give you a show on Saturday or Sunday morning to talk about the open practice for the Gophers this weekend. And then the media will have a couple open practices as well for next week. So hopefully we can keep you updated on everything we are finding out with fall camp in the Gophers moving forward. Now, today we're going to talk about Gophers quarterback in line, Drake Lindsey, and why I am so excited by his potential and upside. Then we're going to break down the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, the Hawkeyes, the Gophers, it's a rivalry for across time that is just absolutely epic. Now, the Gophers have had some struggles with it in Coach Fleck's time here, but they got their first dub in that rivalry with Coach Fleck last season. There was some controversy related to it. Now, the Gophers fans know that the rules is the rules, and that's how they got the dub. But Iowa fans like to say, look, nah, we should have won because of this touchdown that should have been called back for multiple reasons. But I digress. A win is a win. It's in the record books as a win, and Floyd is sitting in the Gophers trophy case right now. So we're going to talk about, should the Gophers have an opportunity to repeat back-to-back? Who are the players on Iowa's roster to be on the lookout for, and how much returning production they have back? We'll talk strengths, weaknesses, and more, the make or break for that matchup in week 4, which could be one of the most important games on the Gophers schedule. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. We're breaking down every single opponent that the Gophers have on their schedule for the entire year, show by show. So next show, we will be covering the Michigan Wolverines, the defending national champions, as the Gophers will have their first away game versus Michigan. So we'll be breaking down the changes for that team as well. I appreciate y'all for listening. I appreciate y'all for commenting in the YouTube chats below. I appreciate you for following and subscribing, and be sure to tell your other Gopher fans about the show. Let's keep building the community. Let's keep the chats going. Let's keep the excitement for the season rolling. But we're going to talk about Gophers' future quarterback, Drake Lindsey, to kick this one off, because I think he could definitely be the next man up for Minnesota at the most important position in football. I think there's a lot of promising insights for him. Now, yes, the Gophers have a quarterback on the verge of 4-star coming in next year's class. They also just signed a quarterback for, I believe, I can't remember if it was 25 or 26, but they've got some Gophers or quarterbacks coming in for the next few classes. But I really, truly believe that Drake Lindsey is going to be at the forefront of the starting position next year for the Gophers. Now, why is that? Why do I believe that? Why am I so excited by Drake Lindsey in the first place? Well, first of all, he has crazy good statistics in high school. And I'm not just talking like 1 year. I'm talking about over the course of his entire high school career. He was consistent, and he consistently improved. Now, on top of that, if you look at his senior season, you're talking about a guy who had 3,941 pass yards his first season, or his senior season, completing 69% of his passes on 383 attempts. So he had a ton of attempts and a great completion percentage with a ton of production. Now, on top of that, when you flip to the touchdowns and the interceptions, this man was almost perfect. We're talking about 54 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. That is a coach's dream, an offensive coordinator's dream, a QB coach's dream. That is taking care of the football at an elite level. And Drake Lindsey did that not only just his senior year, but also his junior year when he started as well. Now, across 6 different games in his senior year, he had over 300 yards passing and a season high in one game of 535 yards passing. And on top of that, he had 2 touchdowns in every single game of his senior year. Not just 2 touchdowns. He had at least 2 touchdowns in every single game. There were games where he had 5, 6, and even 7 touchdowns in a single game. And over his career as a starter, he started junior and senior year, but he played a little bit sophomore year too. Over his career, he had 636 yards, 90 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. 90 to 7 as a touchdown interception ratio is amazing. It is a QB coach and any coach's dream. That is just downright great football play. And on top of that, it was an elite clip, an efficient clip, and completion percentage with a 68% completion rate. Now, if you in my opinion, you can ignore the 3-star rating because there are tons of quarterbacks that have gone on to be lower star quarterbacks or 3-star quarterbacks that go on to the NFL. In fact, I don't think there's a ton of 5-star type guys that are starting in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers was not a 4 or 5-star guy. Justin Herbert was not a 4 or 5-star guy. Now, yes, of course, there are some. Joe Burrow was not a 4 or 5-star guy. Josh Allen was not a 4 or 5-star guy. I don't think Patrick Mahomes was a 4 or 5-star guy. So look, these are a lot of 3-star quarterbacks that are coming up, and you know what you can find across the way with them is exceptional arm talent, is exceptional decision making, and then also the intangibles and the improvement or development to soak everything in and learn. And that's what I get from Drake Lindsey. So I think that you look at him and you see that this can translate, this can make sense. On top of that, the other reasons why I think he could really be in line to have a great career here with the Gophers. He had an impressive spring camp. He was an early enrollee. Both the media and the Minnesota coaching staff had nothing but praises to say for him. And on top of that, he's doing the right things off the field. He's attached himself to the hip of the veteran quarterback, Max Brosmer, who has been a Walter Payton Award finalist and knows what it takes to pass a ball in an elite clip, what to look for, how to break down film and all of that. And he is staying on his hip pocket. He is making sure he learns those traits, not only in the practice facilities, but also attended both of the sessions that Max Brosmer led this offseason in his hometown in the Georgia, Atlanta area. So he's went out and he's learned firsthand out there. He's learned his off the field, what is it called? I'm blanking on the word, his habits. That's what I'm looking for. His habits. He's learned those. He's learned how to maybe even eat nutrition wise. So I think overall he is learning things the right way. And we'll see if he carries those elements to next offseason when we don't know who the guy is for sure. But maybe Drake Lindsey will be bringing guys down to Arkansas to get in that teamwork, get in that chemistry, get in those extra reps and what have you. It'll be something to keep an eye out for, but he seems to be doing everything right. He also early enrolled, which is beneficial to him and the program. Now, another reason I love Drake Lindsey is because he has the size and the intangibles that you would dream of for a starting quarterback, not only at the collegiate level, but also at the NFL level. This dude is 6'5", 230 pounds. He is a big prototype type quarterback. He likes to stay in the pocket. He is accurate as all get out. We've already talked about that. He makes good decisions. But all of that being said, his key elite trait is exactly what is needed to have success in this Gophers offense, and that is anticipatory throwing. This was also Tanner Morgan's best trait, especially in his heyday in 2019. But that anticipatory throwing is exactly what the Gophers need in this offense in order for it to run the way that it needs to. Being able to take the check down, being able to throw the explosive plays open, being able to play a wide receiver into a tight window. Things like that really matter in this offense. And so you take all of that and you pair it all together with taking care of the football. That spells exactly what PJ Fleck is looking for in his style of quarterback. So right now, I am all about Drake Lindsey. I am excited by the development that he can have, and hopefully Max Brosmer can stay healthy for every second of this season so Drake doesn't have to necessarily touch the field. But I love that he's learning every step of the way. And you know what? Hopefully we have a blowout game in Rhode Island. Hopefully we have a blowout game in Nevada. Hopefully we can get to a bowl game and blow them out, because if we can do those things, maybe Drake Lindsey can get some reps, get some on the field action to be able to see what the true speed of the game is when the lights are bright. But overall, I am more and more intrigued with Drake Lindsey and what he could be for this Minnesota program, but also how he committed and stayed loyal, and he has been to them for the entirety of his recruitment period. You talk about all of that and his unique connection to Minnesota with his grandpa having played for the Vikings. It was almost meant to be. It has that meant to be feel type to it, and it could be an amazing storyline and hopefully a storybook career for Drake Lindsey beyond 2024 and maybe becoming the quarterback of the future for the Gophers in 2025 and beyond. So I'm really excited by Drake Lindsey, but we're going to move forward. We're going to talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes. This breakdown is one you absolutely need to pay attention to because there are a lot of things in this Iowa matchup that Iowa probably doesn't get credit for enough, and it is going to be a very, very difficult game for the Gophers. Not one that is impossible, but it's something that the Gophers hopefully can prove themselves in and prove the national media outlets are sleeping on them. We're going to dive into that coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at eBay Motors because they are the place to go when it comes to fixing up your vehicle, getting all the parts and what have you, because passion, drive, and patience is the winning formula for championships, but it's also the winning formula for taking care of your ride or die your vehicle. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Over 122 million parts for your vehicle. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has you covered whether you're into power, into style, or into speed. They've got you covered over at eBay Motors. And the best part of eBay Motors is the guaranteed fit. So your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time. Not once, not twice, but every single time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, you can turn your car into the MVP and bring home the dub. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and the eBay guaranteed fit is for U.S. customers only. All right, Gophers fans, it's time to dive into the Iowa Hawkeyes. It's time to dive into the coaching changes. It's time to dive into the player changes. It's time to dive into the returning players and what have you, because this matchup is going to be critical. Now, North Carolina is a big game in those first 4 games, but Iowa is far more important in my eyes. Now, you look at the coach, you've got Kirk Ferentz. He is the most consistent coach that in the Big Ten. I believe he's the longest tenured coach in the Big Ten, entering year 26 as the coach, and consistency has definitely been there. Now, he won the final year of the West last year, but all Gophers fans know that, but they also know that the Gophers won Floyd last year. And you know what? Although the whole Iowa fan base would argue that that wasn't a win, it's in the record books. It is in the final statistics. It is on the trophy. Minnesota comes out with the dub, and if not for dropping the Nebraska game in 2023, we would be talking about Iowa winning the West Division for the past 3 seasons. So overall, this Iowa team has always been in the conversation in the Big Ten, and that said, divisions are gone now. So Iowa has to continue to prove itself. Now, that being said, Iowa has recorded 8 wins or more in the last 9 seasons of college football. The only year that they didn't get at least 8 wins was in COVID 2020, where they were 6-2. So they were on pace to get there if they would have been able to play a full season. Now, look, y'all, I am not a fan of Iowa, plain and simple. Like, the rivalry lives strong. We hate Iowa, but at the same time, I will give credit where credit is due. I have respect for Kirk Ferentz. And to be 100% honest with you, I think PJ Fleck has shown that through his Iowa week pressers over the last few seasons that I have covered the Iowa Hawkeyes, or Minnesota Gophers playing the Iowa Hawkeyes. It's safe to say PJ Fleck really has a ton of respect for Kirk Ferentz too. He loves the style of football that he plays. They are very similar in that type of mindset. Now, the results haven't been necessarily similar, but PJ Fleck is hoping to turn things around consistently. Now, you move to the coordinators of the Iowa Hawkeyes, and they have one new coordinator in Tim Lester, the offensive coordinator, entering year 1. Now, Brian Ferentz, Kirk Ferentz's son, was the offensive coordinator for the past few years, and he may have been the biggest thing holding the Iowa Hawkeyes back over the last few years. So we will see if Lester is the answer to Iowa's offensive woes. But you look at Lester's coaching career, he's been coaching for 22 years now, 12 years as a head coach at all 3 levels, Division I, Division II, and Division III. Last year, he was on the Green Bay Packers as a senior analyst, but prior to that, he had served as the head coach for Western Michigan from 2017 to 2022. So he was the coach that followed up PJ Fleck. Now, definitely not the same type of success that PJ Fleck saw with Western Michigan, but he did go 37-32, so he had above 500 record, but he has also had stops at Purdue, at Syracuse as a quarterback coach as well. So he's been around in the D1 circuit, and he has an understanding for it, but it's not a sexy hire. It's not a hire that makes you think, oh, they really could turn this thing around in a hurry. So there's still some question marks. It feels a little bit safe, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the defensive coordinator, Phil Parker, look, the dude is one of the best in the business. We're not going to dive too far on him because he gets it done. He's entering his 13th season as a defensive coordinator. He was the recipient of both the major college football assistant coach of the year awards last year in 2023, both the Broyles and the AFCA assistant coach of the year. So he is one of the best assistants in the entire country. He also has recruited and coached 6 Big Ten Tatum Woodson defensive backs of the year. So overall, he is one of the best in the business, not only as a DB coach, but as a defensive coordinator. Now, when you're looking at the transfers that Iowa brought in, there aren't that many. Now, they had the hiccups, the drama of Proctor coming from Alabama back home to Iowa, then deciding, you know what, nah, this ain't it. And he goes back to Alabama. And I know Iowa fans were salty, sick. Some even dropped off the wagon for the NIL collective because they hate the way that college sports are going. And I don't blame them for a big loss like that and feeling that repercussion. And who knows if he actually got some of that money still for the very, very brief weeks that he was back in Iowa. But overall, you look at the 4 transfers they brought in, 2 quarterbacks, Jack Stratton from Colorado State and Brendan Sullivan from the Big Ten, from Northwestern, who was a starter on and off last year, starter prior to their new coach joining them last year. But overall, Jacob Gill also came from Northwestern, a wide receiver, and then finally an offensive lineman from North Dakota, and Cade Borud. Now, nothing of impact in those transfers. None of those guys will likely be starters next season for Iowa, but they did all of their spending the year before, where they brought in Cade McNamara, where they brought in Caleb Brown, where they brought in Eric All. And 2 of those 3 names I just said are back again this season. So you still have some talent on this team, even offensively, even though it hasn't shown in the results of the offense so far, the production, I should say. But they did bring in some quarterback depth behind McNamara after his injury last year. And this quarterback depth should be far better than what we saw from Deacon Hill last year. Now, at the quarterback position, you have Cade McNamara. He's back. He's likely the starter. Although Farron said it's still going to be a competition. They have 5 quarterbacks in this room. Cade McNamara last year, 505 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on 51 completion percentage across 4.5 games. Now, even in a limited sample size, that isn't that great of statistics. So this is why they brought in Brendan Sullivan, not only to push Cade McNamara, but also to challenge or at worst give them a great quality backup if injury were to happen again. But a name to keep an eye on is freshman Marco Lanes or Lanez. He is a name to watch for sure. 6'3", 225 pounds, fairly mobile, and he could be a good in an RPO offensive system, but he isn't quite ready to play right now. So he's a name to keep in mind for the future. Now you move to the running back position. Both starters from last year return, and that you'll notice a lot of that with Iowa in this upcoming season is a ton of returning production. So although they might not have had the year they wanted rushing the ball last year, both have proven that they have some burst and they can be capable even against loaded boxes, which Iowa saw a lot of last year. I still believe Caleb Johnson is extremely talented, but he was hampered and dinged up a little bit last season. But you've got LaShawn Williams, 821 yards last year on 170 attempts, 1 touchdown. And then Caleb Johnson, 463 yards last year, 117 attempts and 3 touchdowns. Now those 2 will lead the way on the ground once again. And if healthy, I don't think many other running backs will get touches of value. You move to the wide receiver room. This is still the biggest question mark for them, in my opinion. The leading wide receivers in this room seem to be locked. It looks like you've got former Ohio State wide receiver Caleb Brown. He is their top returning option with 192 yards and a touchdown. The other wide receiver is former Charleston South standout Seth Anderson. Last year, he had 150 yards and a touchdown, but I think Caleb Brown is super talented. But overall, the wide receivers won't matter if the QB can't throw the ball. So that said, Iowa's QB depth looks a little better at the very least, but we'll see if the passing game actually picks up. Now you move to the tight end room, and that's the difference in this whole talk about offensive weapons, because Iowa is tight end U, plain and simple. I don't think there is any school, rival or not, that can reasonably deny that Iowa and tight ends just are always a match made in heaven. And they have their most talented tight end of last year back in Luke Lachey. Unfortunately, his year was cut short in 2023 due to injury, but he is looking like he is ready to bounce back. On top of that, they have younger guys who got some opportunities with the injuries, like Zach Ortworth and Ostrenga. Both they had moments last year as the other tight ends were injured, but they've got their TE of the future as well in Gavin Hoffman. He could be the future of the room in a couple of years. So tight end's going to remain a staple and a big weapon in this offense. And then you move to the offensive line. Now, Iowa has a ton of starting production coming back on the O-line. Their center, their left tackle, their right guard, their right tackle in Logan Jones, Mason Richmond, Connor Colby, and Jennings Dunker all back. And then you have two players with experience as well, and Nick DeJong and Bo Stevens, who can compete for that fifth spot. So this offensive line, even though they weren't the highest graded offensive line last year, with so much experience back, they can build on it and have more chemistry and maybe take the next step when both of the right side players especially were graded above average. So the offense has a ton of production back from the QB, aside from the QB, but overall, I think it's going to be interesting offense. We'll see. It all relies kind of on the new offensive coordinator. But you flip it to the defense, they're 7th in total defense last year, 5th in the pass defense last year, 15th in the rush defense last year, 4th in scoring defense. One of the top 5, top 10 defenses in the nation. Once again, another year, another top 10 defensive performance from Iowa, and they are returning a ton of folks on this defensive side of the ball. So I think Iowa's going to do it again. And if Iowa could ever figure out the offense, they might actually match up and give top teams a run for their money. You're looking at last season for the Iowa Hawkeyes defense. They had 14 players with over 400 snaps on defense. 10 of those 14 players are going to be back in Iowa City, including Jay Higgins. He had a PFF grade of 89.4, 171 tackles. That is nuts. 2 sacks, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble. He is probably one of, if not their best defender back on this team. Sebastian Castro is the highest graded one at a 91.2, 67 tackles, 1 sack, 3 interceptions, 1 forced fumble. Quinn Schulte, 84.3 PFF grade, 65 tackles, 1 interception. Nick Jackson, 81.4 PFF grade, 110 tackles, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. And Xavier Nwangpa, 86.6 PFF grade, 42 tackles, 1 sack, 1 interception. All 5 of those players were graded higher than the NFL guys like Logan Lee, Cooper DeJean, and Joe Evans. Also, 4 of those 5 players had more tackles than the Gophers' leading tackler for the entire team last season. One of them had 3 times as many tackles, and another one of them had 2 times as many tackles. So this Iowa defense has so much production returning. And that's not even mentioning guys like Yaya Black, Deontay Craig, Ethan Herkett, Aaron Graves. This defense is going to be a nightmare in the conference. So last we take a look at their 2024 class of commits, and Iowa has 8 4-star players coming in. And the ones that catch my attention are Derek Weiskopf, a linebacker, Chima Chinke, edge rusher, Gavin Hoffman, a tight end, and Will Nolan, an offensive tackle. Now, it's likely that all of those guys could possibly not play a single down for Iowa this upcoming season. That's how deep they are at those positions, but I do like the upside of those players. So overall, Iowa is set up for another big year. The biggest question comes into play will be scoring offensively in the pass game. So we're going to talk about strengths, weaknesses, and the make or break for the Gophers versus Iowa in week 4 to end this show coming up next. Now, first, we got to talk about our friends over at FanDuel, because this summer, FanDuel is hooking up every single customer, every single person that goes with a boost or a bonus on the daily. That's right. Every single day of the summer, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. All you have to do is dream up bets as football is coming back. College football, NFL, the Olympics are still going. And then you've got the WNBA coming back into full swing after that, and MLB. There's so many options that you can still put your best bet on and get that money going good. So head on over to FanDuel.com and make the most of your summer, again, with a bonus or a boost on the daily over at FanDuel.com. And you can take a look at the Gophers' first game right now, where they're favored by 2.5 points versus North Carolina. But I would look at that over-under on points, 50.5. I would take the under, because week 1 is always low scoring, especially in Big Ten team type games. I don't think this is going to be any different, even with the ACC high scoring Throwing. UNC Tar Heels coming to town, but overall, FanDuel is the place to be. So check out FanDuel.com. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, we're wrapping up today's show by talking about the strengths, the weaknesses, and the make or break for the Week 4 matchup against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, when we're talking about strengths for the Iowa Hawkeyes, you're talking about one of the defenses with some of the most returning production in the entire country, and it's going to be scary how good they could possibly be, because as you develop that chemistry, as you put things together for another year, it's like you have that mind meld. You have the instinct of where your teammates are. You have the trust built in, and that's how you can turn into more turnovers and more production. That's one number I didn't bring up. Last year, they didn't force many turnovers. They were 94th, tied for 97th in the country in turnovers gained last year. So if that defense keeps the production of the other stuff and increases the turnovers, they could be one of the best teams in the country if that defense plays lights out. So the defense is definitely a strength. On top of that, the consistency at every level of the defense is another strength. The linebackers, the DBs, the D-line, they've got it all. And so that is something to be worried about with this Iowa Hawkeye team. Another strength is that they're returning most of the offensive line. Now, the offensive line wasn't amazing last year, but another year of experience together could go a long way. You flip it to the weaknesses, you've got quarterback upside. They seem to have better depth in the quarterback room than last year, but the actual top end is still very questionable. And Cade McNamara, who had so much praise and so much hype heading into the year, still was passing almost barely above 50% last year, which is not good at all. On top of that, you have new offensive coordinator in Tim Lester, and he's not really kicking the door down with his play style, his play calling. So it seemed like a safe hire over a difference-making type hire, and that could be to Iowa's downfall maybe if it doesn't get too much better. If it's only slightly better and the scoring gets slightly better, they still probably win a lot of games, but is it enough to get them to a playoff, or is it enough to get them wins in a playoff? And so that could be the big difference. Now, another weakness in my mind is the run game seems average overall. Once again, not really difference making. So that could heed them in the long run. And then finally, question marks around the loss of punter Tory Taylor. His impact is going to be felt by this Iowa team if they didn't find that. I know they're running with a freshman, I believe, right now. And if he doesn't step up into a huge amount of consistency, that could be difference, because Taylor was a field flipping machine for that defense to help them in their production. So we'll see if that becomes a huge factor for Iowa moving into the 24 season. But for me, when you're talking about make or break for this Iowa Hawkeyes matchup in Week 4, this will be one of the key swing games in Minnesota's season to determine how successful they can be overall. And this game will have Minnesota with a game-changing running back against Iowa with a game-changing defense. That's going to be tough. Both will have some big plays. I think Darius Taylor will have some breakaways. I think the Iowa defense will probably have a few sacks. They could force a turnover, but I think both of them will try to keep it close with those factors. But if you flip to the other side, Minnesota's defense will be questioned on how difference-making it can be, and the same can be said for Iowa's offense, especially on the ground. So last year's matchup was down to the wire. It was ugly. It was scrappy. It was Big Ten football in a nutshell. And Iowa is going to be salty and have extra motivation to win Floyd back this year. That said, Minnesota at home, Minnesota should also have just as much motivation to prove it wasn't a fluke and keep the pig in Dinkytown. So in the end, I think the difference for this game is one that comes down to quarterback play and turnovers. Those two factors will be the make or break for this Iowa matchup. So it could be Brosmer versus McNamara, who can be the more efficient, bigger play quarterback in this matchup, and also who can take better care of the ball. I think those are the two things that decide who wins this and where Floyd of Rosedale goes. That's going to wrap it for us on today's show. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know about your thoughts on Iowa below. Let me know if I gave them a little too much credit below, but I appreciate y'all for tapping in, listening each and every day. Be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. Be sure to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast, and be sure to tell a friend about the show. Until next time, I will see you tomorrow or Sunday morning, one of the two, where we're going to talk about the updates from the first open practice for the Minnesota Gophers, and then we're going to break down the Michigan opponent. I'll see you then. Row the boat, Sky Imago Gophers, as always, and please don't forget to hit subscribe.